The idea for the newspaper came a few years ago at one of the meetings with a number of migrants. We were then discussing the media coverage of migrants and how the journalists, when they speak to us, they change what we tell them, and they have their own angle and their own interest in the story, and they want to tell what they feel is important for them, not what we want them to tell about us. And one of the members said, why don't we produce our own newspaper? And at that time, we all agreed. We decided, yes, maybe we need to have our own newspaper and to tell our own stories. So we are in full control of our angle and our message, of the story and how we want to tell the story. And then we started having some meetings and discussions and got some training, and we invited a few volunteer journalists to come and support us in the production of the paper.
For the book, what do we have? We had one with the family.
This newspaper is important because migration and migrants are important, and that alone justifies it. At the moment, everything about migration and migrants is mediated largely for the general public through the mainstream media, which happens to be going through one of its very unbalanced phases at the moment. So that's why this paper is important, because it's a voice for people who often don't have a very good voice in the mainstream media, and it covers stories and events, again, which aren't very well covered in the mainstream media. So that's what Migrant Voice is doing.
Well, the Migrant Voice newspaper is a platform for migrants to tell their own stories in their own words. It's about migrants initiating dialogue with the British public. It provides an opportunity for us as migrants to have a conversation, a street conversation with the host community. These are our stories, we write them, and we go out to share them with the public. It's also about us cutting the middleman, the mainstream media, and getting our messages straight to the public.
By publishing Migrant Voice, we aim to take voices of migrants to the outside world. We feel there are many untold stories about migrants on the positive side and reflecting the realities of our lives. Publishing Migrant Voice is a step towards informing the host community of what really goes on.
The newspaper is very important for me and other migrants because I can tell my story, my own story, and others can tell their stories. This is one way for speaking to British public about our lives.
I think of one person who is called Seth. She's Polish, and I have worked with her on Music of Strangers. She's very beautiful. The picture you will take of her will be stunning, and she should be probably on the front page to sell the newspaper.
Would you like to do this story?
And I will ask Seth if she wanted to be interviewed, and if I will just probably I can just send her a few questions to and then put story together, or even if I get the answers from the questions, somebody else can write.
What does she do?
She is an actress, but she is from musical family, so she sings, she dances, she does everything.
I've been involved with them on two fronts, on both as a journalist for the past few years and as a migrant. And it's very interesting because when you first move to a country such as the UK, as a migrant, you think that your experience is very unique, and that there's probably no comparison to how others feel when you live abroad. But when you meet people from a variety of backgrounds, and from a plethora of different economic experiences, and their own individual lives over here, and then you come to realize that there's a thread of commonality, which is comforting. And even the things that make you different from other migrants, it gives you a very well it gives you a very well-rounded perspective as to how to internalize your own experiences and your own difficulties and your own, and your own pleasures in living abroad. As somebody who's, left their home country for whatever reason, and then you tend to take it as a more positive experience, as something that enriches you more as a person.
The Migrant Voice, it is important for me because that is only newspaper maybe in the world say my story also and tell the other people, UK people, in the world people, why I am here, why I have to live in the world, not my country, my home, my sweet home, because many things happen for me.
Paper's important because migrants do get quite a bad rap in the media, and having this outlet to put positive stories into the media and to bring these stories to people is...
Number one message is it's just a general newspaper. It's not for migrants. It's by migrants. I mean, I'm hoping all that the stories will be written by migrants, and it's about migrants. But it's not, each story doesn't have to say, migrants, they're good. It can be, if you can find an interesting story about, I don't know, a Sierra Leonean footballer in the Premiership, I always mention football, I'm sorry, but, or a ballerina, I say for Nazit, say, who's from Ivory Coast, and you just write about it.
Newspaper is one way for us to tell our stories, migrant stories, directly to the public. In particular, stories that we feel are often missing from parts of the media. The positive stories of migrants' contribution to life in the UK. While at the same time we were creating a newspaper that is just a lot of interesting stories about a number of different topics, from sports to arts, music, business, like any normal paper.
You haven't already sent your proposal, because initially we had a deadline to send proposals by the 11th, but it doesn't really matter now. But if you can send it in the next, I would say, because we're trying to say that the deadline for stories is the end of the month, it would be great if you could send it in the next couple of days.
As a journalist, I find it personally very interesting, because not just because migration is important, it's a sort of hot topic, but also because my grandparents were migrants, so I've got a personal stake in all this, obviously. And again, for the reason that migration is important in the sense of finding new angles and new voices, that's what I like about journalism. Or at least a paragraph to say, this is what the story is. And then it's much easier to say, yeah, that's a great idea, or yes, but why don't you just tweak it a little bit and do that? I'm slightly worried if we don't do that. So the aim is to capture their interest, really. And when you're writing for it, the key thing is, well, three things really. One is, don't assume that people know anything about migration, because they probably don't. They just watch television and have a beer in the evening, and that's what their lives are, like many of us. So they're not specialists. You're not writing for specialists. You're writing for ordinary members of the public.
Now, the process of producing the paper is very empowering and very engaging. This is a community organizing at its best. Not that it is in any way very organized, because it's crazy and chaotic, but it's very exciting and creates lots of buzz and energy and interest. Remember, those people writing the stories are not professional journalists.
I must say the best part of the newspaper for me is that migrants are given the opportunity to step outside of the term migrant and to be writers and to be journalists and to share their stories and to be more than just, I guess, a box-framed migrant.
So creating the paper is a very interesting process. It's also a kind of training process for us in terms of how to tell our stories to the media. It involves so many of our network members from 3 cities. Migrant Voice has a network in London and Birmingham and Glasgow. And we've had meetings with our members. Members have come up with lots of stories for the paper. And then we've also done training for people interested in writing for the paper. And after this process, we start to work on the stories, and it involves so many volunteers coming up with ideas, writing, editing, designing, taking photos, and through to distribution, of course.
Okay, what other stories we have?
I think that's what we have at the moment. Now we have a long list of ideas which we should look at that plan. We should try and make that plan and see where
Can I suggest one inspiration? Yes. Is missing? You mean all this list? There's something missing from it?
The process can be really crazy, but I like getting it all together, and the stories are so interesting, and just making it orderly and just bringing it all together to make it look good.
Should we go back to the previous page?
Okay.
Because it was migrants in the house. That Parliament page is a mistake on it.
Seriously?
Yes, there is.
I thought it would be a great chance to do some journalism, which would be the first time I'd done anything like that. And I've really loved doing it. I've loved doing the vox pop, going out on the streets and interviewing people, migrants and an artist at the Tate, and working with a great team. The team here is fantastic, and the team working on the newspaper.
Working on the paper's fun, and the people you're working with are great people, both Migrant Voice, which is and the people who are on its books, as it were. They are very committed people. They're very interesting people with interesting pasts and promising futures, so they've all got something to say, and they say it in a different way. And journalistically, that's a very rich and exciting field to be in. The process is quite haphazard, as a lot of journalism is. People always think it's journalism is somehow on an agenda that you follow, and it's guided by some mysterious hand. It usually isn't. Certainly at Migrant Voice it isn't. So it's quite a haphazard process, and from beginning to end.
Each issue of the newspaper is shaped by the people who take part in its production at the time. So the ideas, the stories, everything. The writers and the members feel ownership of the paper. It is their paper and they feel proud of it, and so do I.